Hey, it's Mr. A back at you with another art video. So I'm up here kind of hanging out in my alternative studio. So I have an alternative setup today, but I wanted to be able to talk to you guys today. It's my first time doing a face reveal. But during this kind of outbreak situation where people are going to be stuck at home, I figure I'd be happy to share a lot of the information I do, um, in the studio every day. So today we're just going to start off with a draw along, but I'm hoping that this can be a format for us to explore throughout these couple weeks that we might be stuck indoors. So we'll see what happens. So I'll be focusing on trying to do at least one stream a day during the week, and I'd be loving to hear your feedback. But again, if you haven't joined us before, welcome. You can find me on Instagram at Art with Anderson. Be sure to look for those little underscores in between. And then you also have this YouTube channel. There's several videos that I've created in the past for my former students. And if you're not aware, I used to be a art teacher. So the thing is I am going to be kind of ad-libbing this as we go. I just want to do some checks real quick to make sure we're on. And then you also have, yeah, looks like my audio is all set up. And here we go. So today I'm going to be focusing on one-point perspective. And you've probably seen one of my more popular videos if you're a subscriber, and that is drawing a bedroom in one-point perspective. But we really didn't talk about some of those fundamentals, and this is a great opportunity to start looking at ways you can apply the knowledge. So if you learn the way of thinking around it, you can really start to expand your knowledge into drawing more complex forms. So key thing to think about is what I have here, a horizon line. Now when I say horizon, another word you're going to hear a lot is going to be horizontal. The cool thing is the word horizon is in horizontal. So the horizon, if you picture, this being like, if you look out at the ocean or look out across a really flat area where the sky up here meets the ground, that's going to be, in effect, the line that divides the sky from the ground. We call that the horizon. Now, when we talk about other types of lines that go opposite, okay, so perfectly vertical, straight up and down. Vertical, I remember through, if you're ever into skateboarding, let's see, you can see that. Vertical lines are lines that are going straight up and down in comparison, or at a 90-degree angle. So what we're going to do first is explain exactly, or we'll demonstrate what perspective is. So we have a horizon line, which is always a part of a perspective drawing, even if you can't see it, and I'll get into that later. But there's something about the unseen that's really important when you're doing these types of drawings, and that is the vanishing point. Now, when people say one-point perspective, they're talking about one vanishing point. Now, I drew an actual visual dot right here, so you can understand what that is, but in reality, it's a system we use that technically we don't really even see this object. It just becomes a reference point that we can attach things to. So one other word that I'm going to be using is converging line, or a phrase. So when I say converging, that means to come together. So if you can think of that Beatles song, Come Together, everything comes together at one point, and that is the vanishing point. So let's focus on this. We'll be doing horizontal, vertical. I'm going to put this up here so you can see it. So vertical, horizontal, and converging lines to keep this simple for now. So I'm going to be definitely using a straight edge. You don't have to use a ruler with any inch markings or anything, but it's going to be important that we understand the difference between vertical and horizontal lines. So we already talked about the horizon, and let's put our first vertical line here. And I'm just going to put one right across the horizon. So when I make this perfect cross, we say this is perpendicular, or it's at 90 degrees. If you've done geometry before, sometimes you see a little rectangle there to show you that it's perfectly 90 degrees. But we don't really need that for now, but I drew it light enough, I'm going to ignore it. I'm also going to put a vertical line up here above the horizon. I'm going to put one down here. So the trick is, how do I tell if something is actually vertical, without some type of tool? Well, the best way I've found is to think about the edge of your paper. If I were to slide this over without changing the angle, does it line up with that? Yes. Yes. Okay. So those are good ways to do this. Now we're going to be using these vertical lines, and we're going to connect them with several other lines to create some three-dimensional cubes. And you'll start to see the beauty of this system, which is one-point perspective. So check this out. We have this vertical line. I'm going to turn this into the side of a square. So I'm going to make a horizontal line and try to make this a rectangle or a square. But the more parallel you can get it with this, or horizontal these lines are actually, the more clean your drawing is going to look. Okay? I'm going to start with this one. Now the thing is whenever you're doing perspective drawing, what you're looking for are corners, or if you're into geometry, intersections of lines. So if you think about this ruler as a straight line, okay, and then you take this pencil crosses at an intersection. It could be anywhere, but it creates a point right where they intersect or come together. Those points or corners are where we're going to target with our ruler and try to connect them with converging lines that head right to the vanishing point. Okay? Now the key thing is you need this straight edge in order to do this correctly, because if you don't have a straight line, this falls apart pretty quickly. So before I start drawing, I'm going to identify them. I'm going to put a little point so you know where I'm looking. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we have 4 points, or 4 corners on this box. We also have a point which is our vanishing point. I'm just going to put VP right here for vanishing point. All right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a light line using my ruler, but I'm going to start, think of this. See if you can take your ruler and just swing it around on one finger. See how it pivots like that? We're going to put our finger close to here so you can still see this dot, okay? And we're going to keep it close to that, and we're going to slide up till we hit our first dot. Now when you're drawing with a ruler, if you're right-handed, it's really helpful to keep your left hand over here flat and spread out, or what I used to call loser fingers, like this. Spread out and keep that ruler in place. Now the other thing is I don't usually grab the pencil so close like this, where like I'm writing. I usually try to pull back and I lightly drag it across the paper like this. Okay? Now same thing, I'm going to use this as my pivot point, the vanishing point right here, and I'm going to start to see which one, if I swing it around this point, I'm going to run into first. Okay? Looks like I got a match right here. This top corner, I'm sliding gently across there. Now let's try it again. I'm rotating this thing almost like there's a pin in it around this point, and I'm going to stop at this point now. Draw a light line all the way there. And then I'm going to complete that by sliding it up over to this corner. Alright, now what I want you to picture in this case is we've connected all of these corners to a vanishing point. And what does that represent? Now to explain the vanishing point, beyond a place where all these lines converge, I want you to think specifically about if you were watching an airplane fly away from you. How does that airplane start to appear as it goes farther away? It starts to get smaller. If it flies far enough away, it's going to fly over that horizon, but even before it gets there, right about as it's about to be there, you can't even see it. Sometimes even before it gets there, you won't be able to see it because it's so small. So what this does is if you picture this as just like a card that's standing up, or a piece of paper, anywhere along here, this would tell us how small to make it the farther it is away in our picture. We're creating an illusion, something it's like it's on a two-dimensional piece of paper, but it has the illusion of 3D. And so this system tells us how small to place things, or how small to make them to appear that they're farther away. So this is an illusion of depth. So let's scoot this thing back. Now I want you to think of this as just a long stick of butter. It's so long that it goes over the horizon. So what are we going to do? The key thing and the most common mistake for beginners when they learn this is they have some sort of idea like, oh, there's an angle in there. It has to be 3D. Well, I'm going to keep this simple for you. One trick. So if you have a ruler, what I want you to do is line up one edge right here, and then I want you to go to the other edge of the ruler, and I just want you to put a line over there. What did we do? We transferred a parallel line, a vertical line here to there. Now on its own, it almost looks like it's tilted, right? So, but what that is there's kind of an optical illusion. But what we want to do is look for the point where, see how this one, let's call this A, let's call this one B, okay? And there's a line attached to A and B. I'm going to follow back A all the way to here, to where it intersects with this new line, and I'm going to put a new point, okay? The next thing I want to do is the same thing with B. I'm going to slide back along that line and find the intersection. I'm going to put a new point. So see how I'm still using the same points, but I'm sliding it back into the distance? Now what we're going to do is at that exact point, I want you guys to put a horizontal line. Now this is a little bit more difficult because we actually have to slide it up. So what I'm going to do is line up my ruler with the horizon. Try not to change the angle. I'm going to slide it down until it hits that point. If you skip this step, you're going to really throw this thing off, believe me. I'm going to draw a line across. Okay? This line should be perfectly parallel with this one, this one, this one. All three of them should be like railroad tracks. They never should be different angle. Now, you can't really see it just yet, but what we're going to do, if I were drawing a solid block, I'm going to firm up this line by drawing it again between our new points. And I'm going to see what you guys think. Notice that this line goes through all three of our points now, but I'm only darkening up this area. So I got a new point here. But what I want you guys to notice is we forgot about this line right here. So if we call this one A, B, let's call C, and D. So what's the deal with D here? Why can't we, like if this was a solid stick of butter, okay, we wouldn't be able to see D because it's behind the front of this square. It's inside the form, right? So let's think of an object like a aquarium. It's a rectangular box, but we can see through it because it's glass. The other thing is that just like D over here, we can't see the corner in here, especially if this was an empty box. We'll just look at how that's going to work out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, let's just actually, okay, hold on one second. Sorry, this does get confusing, but if you follow it step by step, it's going to be good. I'm also going to lower this thing a little bit so you guys can see a little bit better. Hopefully that helps you. Okay, so we have A, B, C, and D. Now I'm going to label this point back here. I'm going to call it A2. This one is going to be B2. This one is C, it heads back, we'll call it C2. Now what we're looking for is D2. We have D, but what I have to do is we need to make two lines. One has to be a vertical line down from C, because to get a D, right, we have a vertical line here. And then we also have one from A to D. First, let's decide for ourselves, what type of line is this? Is it horizontal or vertical? Let's double check. I'm going to put my ruler up and down on it, and you guessed it, it crosses that horizon line, so that means it's vertical. So I drew a horizontal here, but what I'm going to do is keep it vertical. I'm going to slide it back until I meet C2. I'm going to double check the best of my abilities that this line is going to be nice and parallel. It's hard for you to see, but I'm going to do it right now. There you go. I just drew a vertical line from C2 down to D2, which we've now located. Now the magic of perspective is if we get everything vertical, horizontal, and lined up with our vanishing point, we're going to double check. What type of line between A and D is this? If this one was vertical, this one has to be horizontal, right? So if I look for a horizontal line between A2 and D2, check this out. All three of those lines line up almost perfectly. So there we have D2 is also on this converging line. It goes to the vanishing point right through there. So what we've done is create essentially a glass box. We can see through it. Okay? So these are the basics of using one-point perspective. If you can master this, you're ready for some new ideas. But for this next box, I'm going to be putting it up here. Okay? Using this vertical line to connect it to the same vanishing point. So let me just make this into maybe a more narrow rectangle. We're going to see what happens. So I'm making sure to try to use vertical and horizontal lines to make this rectangle. Let's do the same thing. We're going to call it A, B. Oh, shoot. I think I did it the other way. That's D. Here's B and C. So A, B, C, D. We're looking for the points or the corners that are going to connect to the vanishing point. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm lining these things up. So notice that my finger is near the vanishing point and I'm sliding my ruler, turning it or pivoting it. I'm going to hit D first. So I'll draw that line. It's a little bit off. Sorry, I'm looking at the video instead of the paper. Okay, there's D. I'm going to turn again, try to pivot, connect those two on an angle. There we go. Same thing, we're going to hit C, but this time I'm going to skip C because it goes through. I'll explain why in a second. I'm going to go to the outside first. So I'm going to go from here down to B. So I rotated from the vanishing point right here and then lined it up. Boom. Now right now, can you see that this one looks a little bit more solid in that I can't see through it, whereas this one kind of looks like a glass box. And what we're going to do is a similar thing, but we're going to cut it off shorter. We want just maybe like a smaller thing that's hovering over here. The other thing is if this is the sky and this is the ground or the earth, what that means is that this could be kind of like a beam that's floating above us or it's sticking out of a tall building. We don't really know. So what I'm going to do is cut this off. We're going to try to make a box that's maybe falling out of the sky. And we're going to see, sometimes it's not necessary to draw all of these lines that we did before. So I am focusing on this box, and I'm going to focus on between B and A right here. That is what type of line? Vertical. I'm going to slide it back, keeping it vertical. And between those two converging lines, I'm going to draw a straight line down. Now the straight here, okay? A2, right over here, is going to be, we need a D point over here, but how do we find that? It's simple. What we do is we take a horizontal line, so I'm setting up here. I'm trying to slide it up, keep it the same. I'm going to put a horizontal line between those two and draw a new point. The cool thing is we already have a solid form. We didn't even have to draw those lines for C. And as you get the hang of this, you'll be able to kind of take some shortcuts like I did, and you're going to be able to identify which lines to draw, which ones to leave out. So we'll get there in a second, but I do want to give you a couple different ways to think about this. The key thing to think about here is that we think about when people say, I want to learn how to draw in 3D, what are they actually saying? Like, 3 dimensions means I have a height to something, I have a width, and then a depth, right? And we're trying to draw that in 3 dimensions. Or you have a video game, it's on a flat screen, but why do we think that it has depth? It's this same illusion. Something appears farther away because it gets smaller. And so when we say 3 dimensions, we as humans can only see in 3 dimensions. This is a perfect way to think about it. This block, thing is we have 1 dimension is right here. Okay? We have a second dimension that's right here, and then we have a third dimension here. But can we see the back of the box? Like if this box wasn't made out of glass, could we see this side of the box? No. We're limited. We can't be in 2 places at once. So the thing is, we want to take advantage of that and really think about what can we see at a given point in time. So this takes me to my next point though, because if we've understood like, oh, we should be able to see 3 sides of the box, that's really important. We know that, oh, we only have to draw 3 sides, right? Unless we're drawing something that we can see through. But I want to show you this other situation. Now this line that I drew, let's think of it as like a building. So I'm going to draw a horizontal line here, here, okay, and we'll bring one down. Now notice, I want to bring this up. Oh, sorry, you can't see that as well. I feel like it's a little out of focus. Let me fix that for you guys. But while I'm talking, I don't know if you can see right here, I made the line a little bit too long. Let's see if it'll refocus for us. Give me 1 second. Just going to turn the focus on. There we go. All right, so if you can notice, this line, I drew it a little bit too far, but did I connect this line with it? No, why not? Because this line is not horizontal. Horizontal means it's always referencing this line. So for example, this is not horizontal for our drawing. Okay, so if you're tempted to double check a line, make sure that it's a perfect cross, 90 degrees, and you'll see why I trimmed that off. If you get these things out of whack, you're going to have a lot of trouble with this. Let's get back to our design here, okay, because this says a lot about what perspective really is. So we have 4 corners again, and let's label them A, B, C, and D. Now we could connect all 4, but we know from what we did before, we don't have to draw this back far one, right? But we're not going to draw A this time because it's on the other side, and you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to start with my pivot point here. I'm going to turn just like this and connect those 2 points. Okay? I'm going to skip A because it goes through the front of this thing. I'm going to do C now. Okay? But to see this properly, we're going to have to use an eraser. Okay? So what I'm going to do is this solid square is in front and it's blocking our view of the horizon. So I'm going to erase that line inside of the box. Now right now it looks like this is standing in front of that horizon. It creates some depth, what we call overlap. We can't see through this because we don't see the line going behind it. Now we're going to do the same thing for the side, but I want to just draw your attention to this Because one side of the square is on the lower part and the other one is up here, it means we can only see two sides of this box. And you ask, how is that possible to be in 3 dimensions? Well, it's amazing when people start digging into this how they realize that the position of an object, the size of an object, how far it is away from your perspective, that affects how we draw it. So the thing is if we just put a vertical line in, just for the sake of this discussion, okay, and I erase this here, okay, let's think about what this box is. Now, the optical illusion thing, and as an artist, you have to take control of this. Is this a building that's far away? Or is it a very small block that is getting really close to my face? In reality, we don't know. This is a made up situation. So the cool thing is you have a lot of control, but you have to give your viewer hints on how to do this. And if you're really interested in these optical illusions with perspective, you should check out an artist named M.C. Escher. You've probably seen it in your school classroom growing up. You know, it's really cool, and they play with the same types of perspective and they mess with you a little bit. So there's a lot of interesting ways that this system isn't perfect and we can take advantage of them with some really creative results. So let's take a look at this box. Now I want to see exactly, I'm going to erase these lines. We did those for reference. It looks a little bit more freestanding now. Well, let's figure out a way to make this look like a building and give the viewer a hint. Now, you've probably seen this before. What I'm going to do is draw a line from the vanishing point that goes all the way out. Okay, and then I'm going to draw another one right here from the vanishing point all the way out. Now those are a little bit light, but I want you to think of this as a road. So if I draw a line down the middle of the road, it's going to go to the vanishing point. I'm going to draw it, make it a little bit thicker. But I want you to think about what we just did. Here is, now this becomes a building, or it might be seeming like one. Okay, we don't really know what this is. It might be. So we just gave our viewer a road to focus on. So let's think about other things that could go on this road. Okay, I just want to darken up these lines for you so you can see them a little bit better. All right, so we have a road, we have a building over here, and let's just put a sidewalk in there. So I'm going to put a line like this. Okay, there's our sidewalk. So creating things that people recognize will help people understand these forms. To make this into a building, let's try putting a door on the front side and then a door over here. This is a very common struggling point for a lot of people. So let's start off with doing one on the front. It's pretty straightforward, but we're going to make sure this is our vertical line. I'm going to slide it over, make sure it's parallel. I'm going to make a door shape. 2 vertical lines. Okay, and then I'll put a horizontal line at the top. Okay, that looks like a door. If I wanted to put a window in here, same thing. I'm just going to put a long window at the top. Okay, now we have a building. I want to put a door on this side of the building, but I don't know how to do that. Now what's really interesting is you have to kind of wrap things around the objects that they're on. So I want you to think of them as different faces of an object. So we were focusing on the corners before, but what I want you to do is think of this as the front face, and this would be a side face. Okay? So what I'm going to do is try to take this rectangle and push it over to this side. But before we do, I want to think about what types of lines I'm going to need in order to make it look good. Because a lot of people do something like this. They'll draw a vertical line, and then they draw a horizontal line over here, and then they wonder why their door looks strange. Now there's two things wrong with this door right now. Number one is it looks too short, right? It's shorter than this door. It's not terrible. It looks kind of close, but there's something else off about it. It's too wide. And you'll see what I'm talking about, because what we're going to do is a technique that I like to use, and I call it wrapping around and using similar lines. So I'm going to erase this. So let's say we're responsible for copying this thing, this shape of the door, onto another face of an object. All you have to do is look at the first face that the shape is on, and we see what types of lines. We see vertical lines, and we see horizontal lines. Okay? Now I want you to picture this face. All it is we turned it this way. It's the same shape over here, but it changed a little bit. It still has vertical lines, but instead of horizontal lines, it has two converging lines. So if that changes, we know we only have to change the horizontal lines when we switch it over. So let's think about that. It still needs vertical lines, right? Because those are common. I'm going to draw two vertical lines. Okay? Now notice that the bottom of this shape already has a converging line on it. It goes to the vanishing point. The top already has one too. But if we drew this all the way up, that door would be way too tall. So what are we going to do? How do we find how tall if we wanted them to be the same? Well, we're going to project a measurement around the building. So check this out. I'm going to take the top of this door, and I'm going to lightly draw a horizontal line to the corner right here. That's my new point. I'm going to put a little dot there. I'm going to connect that to the vanishing point and draw it across this building. That line tells me where to trim. So we know that now the height of these two doors are the same. I could do the same thing with this window. Let's try that out. So I'm going to start off with a vertical line here, and I'm going to wrap that measurement around. So here and here. I'm going to draw a line to that wrapped measurement. This might be getting a little bit too chaotic here, but for those of you who are a few steps ahead, you might like this. So can you see that we were able to create a window that has the same height? It's a little bit difficult to see here in this lighting, and I apologize. So we've created a few different variations here, but another thing that's really helpful to think away. Three types are up here. We have a vertical line, a horizontal line, and converging. So let's review. Vertical is up and down, but it's not just any straight up and down. It has to be at a 90-degree relationship or perfectly crossing this horizontal line. Converging lines can be at any angle, but there's only one specific one, right? And that goes to the vanishing point. We can't just make it up out of thin air. We have to connect it to the vanishing point, and it should connect to a corner. So what I'm going to do is, well, let's just say corner to VP, vanishing point. Our vanishing point, last thing I don't think I mentioned, is we called this line something specific. It was a horizon. The horizon is very important because that's where, let's say the sun is setting over here. That's where the sun goes behind. Now that means that this is the sky, this is the ground. Okay? And the vanishing point is always on the horizon. Now the last thing I want to share with you guys when you're thinking about this is, how is it when we talk about this vanishing point, what is that? It's not really we can't see it, it's already invisible, but the way to think about it is it's a way, it's an artificial way of creating relationships inside of a drawing. Let me say it again. It's a way of creating relationships inside of a drawing. It's not reality. It's a illusion or a idea that tries to represent reality. So when you're trying to draw realistically, there's no such thing as the way that we see and feel the world around us being replicated on paper. Take that pressure out of it. This is using a system that has to work on its own. There are ways that this falls apart, and we can talk about that in other ways, in other sessions, but I want you guys to know this is not something that is perfect. In fact, there's a lot of ways that you could improve on this or mess with it to make it a little bit more expressive. Okay, the other thing too is it's very good for drawing straight objects like this with right angles, rectangular things, but it does get a little bit more complex when you have to change, let's say, a triangle or a circle or a sphere. And we can cover that in some other videos. So if you have any questions while I'm still here, I got about 10 more minutes. If you're watching and have something you want me to try to draw in the last few minutes here, I'd love to try to fit that in. But I do want to leave you with kind of a teaser of what I would want to do in our next section, and that is to try to think of, first of all, how do you find the center of an area? Okay, so here we go. First off, I want to put my, what type of line? It's straight across. It shows the difference between the sky and the ground. It's called the horizon. So I just drew that. Now we're going to be focusing on making something like a billboard. So I'm going to start off my vanishing point. Let's just make a building actually. And I'm going to draw the wall here. You guys see that? Okay. To the bottom of this vertical line, I'm going to draw two converging lines. Okay, and I'm going to make the front of the building right here. I'm moving pretty fast, okay, but this will come with time. Now I need a vertical line to end this building, so I'm going to take my ruler. I'm going to use that same trick from before and make sure I get a vertical line because I lined it up over here. I'm going to do some erasing just to make this look a little bit nicer. So I can't see through this wall, I can't see the horizon. And if you're counting, how many walls can you see in this picture? Let me just extend this out real quick. If you're paying attention, we can only see two walls because the top is above our head. The bottom is down here, we can't see through. So this is something I wanted to show you. This line also represents where your eye level is at. So anything that is right here would appear right at your eye level. So if you were going to walk into this building and you saw that the door was down here, would you be able to fit in that door? Doubt it. So it's something always to keep in mind, is that this line represents your eye level. So let's create a door on this side. It has to be above your eye level if you're going to fit in. So I'm going to create a door here. Okay. Now we're going to do something kind of interesting here. We're going to be able to look inside of this building. So what I'm going to do is take this corner that was not connected to a vanishing point, and I'm going to connect it there now. Slide it out nice and light for now. Then draw a horizontal line. See, there was one here, right? So I'm going to do a horizontal line from this new intersection. Draw it out there. And then a corner. Draw it straight up. If we took an X-ray of this building, we'll be able to see it now. Okay, so if this building was a fish tank, we could see inside, right? So actually, we could do some fun things with this, but what I want to show you right now is how do we know, let's say we wanted to build a little rectangle right in the center of the rooftop here that stuck out like an antenna. So we have this X-ray building here. When I said trying to find the center, we want to find something that's exactly in the middle of this, what in reality is a rectangle, right? But right now it's distorted. It looks a little strange. The beauty of it is you don't even have to measure, do anything that's complex for math. All you do is connect the opposite corners with an X. So here to here, take this, make an X between those two, and where those lines end up is the exact middle of that. Now the tricky part about drawing in perspective is that you will never really, like, there'll be a lot of drawing lines or what we call construction lines that get erased eventually. But what we just did is we saved a lot of time. We figured out exactly where the middle of this building is. Okay, so let's just try that real quick. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to draw a line right here. And it basically, if you can see, there's my antenna. It sticks out directly in the middle of that thing, right? And notice how far over to the left it is. But technically, we'd have to erase all this interior stuff. But what I want to show you now is how do we know if I wanted to put a window that was right in the middle of this rectangle here, how would we do that? Well, we could use the same situation we had before where we make an X between those two corners, or we could transfer using horizontal and vertical lines and wrap around, combining that technique I showed you before. So let me show you that. I know that this is the middle of this box here, but this line, since it shares a side, like this in reality from here to here is the same length as here. I know it seems a little trippy, but if we draw a horizontal line through here, we're dividing that rectangle in two. So if I use a perfectly horizontal line and just draw it right through that X, I have a new intersection here. And if I put a vertical line down here, I know that this is the middle of my building. But I want you guys to see this. Isn't it strange that this is wider than this? When we think about the middle of something, we think of equal halves. But what this does is it stretches and then compresses things so that the farther away they go, they not only get shorter, but they get skinnier as well. So the first half of this building appears to be wider than the other part, but because we're compressing it as it gets farther away, that creates the illusion of depth. So if I put another X in between here, I could certainly find midway down, but you can start to see how all of these points relate to one another. So what does it mean though? This is the last thing I want to point out. You probably can't see it very well. But what does it mean if this line doesn't go directly into this X? It means that this one of these lines was not perfectly vertical. If you are not precise about getting your lines perfectly vertical, perfectly horizontal, or directly on target with the vanishing point, you're going to see that sometimes the lines don't line up perfectly. Nobody's perfect. You're not a computer. And even computers, like if you zoom in, it gets pixelated. So don't hold yourself to such high a standard. This takes practice, and there's always some wiggle room. So I want you guys to know that it's okay, but in theory, if it worked perfectly mathematically, these things should be on target, and the closer and more accurate you get as you practice, the best thing is you'll be able to really get these things honed in and really solid. Okay? Now the last thing I want to show you before I go is going to be to do, how do you do circles? Well, the thing is let's see, I got this can right here. I'm just going to draw a circle real quick. Okay, not perfect. But, you know, the problem with the circle is we could certainly say, oh, well, we want to make a ball that's farther down over here. But I want to show you guys how we'd make a cylinder first, okay? Well, a cylinder, it's a little bit different because we don't have any corners like we did on our last one. Remember we marked them A, B, C, and D. How do we connect a circle or a round object to a vanishing point? Well, it gets a little complicated if you don't know this one trick. I talked about it in my last video about those letters that I put into perspective, but it's something called a tangent. And I want you guys to think about this. We're going to put a circle right here. And I want you to think about this guy as shooting arrows, okay, at the moon. All right, the moon is up in the sky, and there's a guy over here shooting arrows directly from the vanishing point. Now, he's not very good at shooting arrows at first, so he shoots one, and it misses entirely. Is there an intersection between this and the circle? No. Let's take a second shot. He goes over here, and he goes boom, and it goes straight through. It punches two holes, one in the front, one in the back. Okay, so we have two connections. All right, now he's getting more accurate here, and he's aiming right for the center of the circle. So he takes another arrow and shoots it, and so it hits and it stops right at the center. Okay, now you might think, oh, it connects with the center, that's only 1 point. Technically it's always two. If it breaks this outer ring, it connects right here. It might stop here, right? But if it enters and exits, that's two. And this is still technically like 2 points of intersection, especially to the center, okay? He takes one more shot, okay? But he's getting tired, so he takes one and it gets a little bit off course, and it goes and it just grazes it. He hits it, but it keeps going. This is the only way for a line to intersect with a circle or a round object and not touch it twice. And that's called a tangent. So a tangent, if you, again, I've said, you know, I like to go off on tangents when I'm kind of talking too much. But for this purpose, the tangent is a geometric term. We're going to be using that, especially our ruler, to find it out. There's only one place, like for each side, where this can be a tangent. I want you to see that. Like when he was firing the arrows, he couldn't change, right? He could only hit it right there. Because if he hit it right here, it would go through at 2 points. So there's only one shot on each side. He could do one here, and he could do another tangent on this side. Okay, so what we're going to do is look for the tangent on both sides of the circle using the same technique we used last time. So I'm going to hold my finger near the vanishing point, and I'm going to turn it and pivot it so I don't lose touch with my vanishing point here, right? And wait until it hits it just at the tangent, right where it intersects once. And I'm going to draw a line straight down there. Now I'm going to start from the outside again. So I'm coming from the outside in, coming from the vanishing point. I'm not losing track. I'm going to go right to that edge. I'm going to draw my second line. There's my tangent. Now right now, I want you to think of this as a very long log, okay? So for example, if we drew the rings on the tree, right? It's a very old tree. It's got a big log. That's half the size of this building, maybe a redwood or something. But it's not this long. So what do we do to get this thing out here? Okay? What I want you to think about, and this is a common topic when we get to complex shapes, I want you to mentally copy and paste this circle and shrink it down and think of it on like a railroad. It's going to shrink down, but it's still going to stay a circle. Okay? Instead of just drawing an arc, I want you to really draw a circle that is tangent to both of those lines. So notice I'm lightly sketching that in, trying to feel it out. You're going to end up with this kind of smoky circle right here. But all you got to do is erase the inside half And by sketching it out very lightly, you can get a taste of where it's going to be, and you can carefully go back in and really start to darken that up. If I erase these lines here, just lightening this up for you, okay, I've made a cylinder in perspective. Now we haven't really covered what a circle would look like facing this way, but I will do that in a later video. Sorry, just darkening this up so you guys can see it. This kind of reminds me of a big sushi roll or something. But what I wanted you guys to see is that there are ways of connecting complex shapes. But the key word to remember is tangent. And what I did is I did the same technique of pivoting around the vanishing point, sliding there until I just met it. Right? And that's the line. If I connected it here, it would go through twice. You can see 1, 2. Finding the tangent. There's only one on each side. So, I hope you guys found this thing pretty helpful. If you have questions for any future videos or whatever, I'm planning on doing one live cast per day at least, maybe more than one if it gets crazy. But like I said, I can't leave the house just like most people in the country and around the world. So there's no sense just getting bored out of your skull. And if you guys have suggestions on when, like if you're home from school and you like maybe like an early afternoon or lunchtime one, and maybe one at in the evening, let me know what times work best for you. And again, I want to do some fun stuff, not just all this technical. So if you have some ideas for like drawing characters from a movie or a video game, I'd love to check that out and share my skills with you. But I'll start with doing some perspective so you guys can really work on that at home, because it's kind of just a ongoing thing that you can practice and really beef up and have some fun with. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do a perspective drawing, be sure to tag it on Instagram at Art with Anderson. So please, like, I'd love the support. I'll give you a shout out, and I really appreciate you guys following along. And be sure to check in for live streams for throughout this week and next week. And I'm considering starting up like a Patreon and stuff like that. So if you're interested in seeing more content or have some ideas for me, I'd really appreciate it. But again, I really appreciate your time today and looking forward to seeing you next time. So keep up the good work and keep on creating. Thanks again.